Morning. Memches Hamid Beis, and we did the Mishnah, the first Mishnah of the two Mishnayos that are on the Amud. And let's just summarize. There are three parts, segments in the procedure of baking the bread. And the first of the three is lisha, is the kneading of the dough. After that is something called aricha, in which you shape the dough. And then finally, there's the afiyah itself. You bake the bread in the oven. And if there's one oven for three ladies, and the probability is that they won't be able to bake in that small oven simultaneously because of the smallness of the oven, and now we have a problem of chimutz. If we delay the process and you have a dough that's waiting to be put into the oven, a certain period of time will pass by, and the fear is that the dough might leaven, it might ferment and become chametz. Rabbi Gamliel suggests a system which we called staggering. So the first woman will begin her lisha. When she finishes her lisha and she goes on to aricha, the second lady online will begin her lisha. When the second lady finishes her lisha and she's ready for aricha, the first lady has already finished her aricha, she's ready for afiyah, so that by the time let's say the first lady has finished her afiyah, and now the middle lady is ready to do to complete her aricha. She's ready to put her shaped dough into the oven, and then the third lady is right behind. And then once you have the staggering system, Rabbi Gamliel and the Rambam says this explicitly in the Pirush HaMishnayos, Rabbi Gamliel is not afraid that in the short period of time that you allow between one, the whole process until finally it goes into the oven, that'll come to chimutz. And the Chachamim are much more concerned about this. They don't accept Rabbi Gamliel's kula. And the Mishnah records that in this case, we don't. Let's read the Mishnah again just to remember the Mishnah because it's been a few days. Rabbi Gamliel Omer Shalosh Noshim Loshos Ki Achas V'Ofos B'Tanur Echad Zu Achar Zu. So I made a mistake. I attributed the shita of stagnating to Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel's not even worried about stagnating. He doesn't even require it. Thinks that in the short amount of time, which will take aricha and afiyah, and that will pass by, so that even though all three women began their lisha simultaneously, there's not enough time to worry about chimutz, where the Chachamim require that they start bazecher zeh, sholosh noshim otzkos b'botzei ki achas, and achas losha, achas oreches vi achas ofa. So we have this stagnating system. And Rabbi Akiva points out that, wait a second, you cannot objectify this and formulate principles in an absolute way because there's so many relative factors that come into consideration. For example, he says that there are differences between an oven that's already been heated up, and there the baking process will be very relatively quick, as opposed to an oven that is cooled off already and you have to heat it up. And there are other factors that come into consideration. For example, you might have fuel that burns quickly, that's called eitzim yevechim, as opposed to more moist eitzim that'll take a longer period of time. You also might have issues about a woman who's more zariz than another woman, that she does the aricha in less amount of time, etc. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva says that you cannot set up a specific time period And this stagnation theory will not necessarily be correct. You cannot just simply say that one woman starts the uh, lisha, and then she goes on to aricha and so forth and so on. I mean, how are you going to know such a thing? And there are all sorts of different elements and variables that go into the equation. So therefore, according to Rabbi Akiva, if we cannot accept the shita of stagnating it, because again, as we said before, there's so many different elements that go into the equation. So then we're going to have to figure out, according to Rabbi Akiva, what does he advocate exactly? The Mishnah concludes with a principle which maybe reveals the secret according to Rabbi Akiva. Zaklal Tafach Tiltosh Bitzone. She should be very careful. And if during the process of preparing the dough for baking, she realizes that tafach, in other words, the dough is about to blow up, so to speak, and once it expands, it's coming close to becoming chametz, then she should wash her hands in cold water and then continue working with the dough with cold water, and that's going to arrest the process of fermentation. Now, I have here one or two notes. He says the following, that we're going to see later on that Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Akiva are very closely related one to the other. And it was Rabbi Gamliel who said that the period of time that would go by if they all began kneading the dough simultaneously, all these three ladies, is such a short period of time that we don't have to worry about chimutz. And Rabbi Akiva wanted to accept Rabbi Gamliel, but he had a problem, because how can you tell me that as an absolute rule, three women will begin their lisha simultaneously, and it's such a short amount of period of time? How do you know how do you know how long it's going to take to bake the bread? If the eitzim are lachim and not yeveshim, it's going to take a longer period of time. If the tanur is tzonen and not cham, it's going to take a longer period of time to heat up the oven. And if this woman is a little bit more lazy than another woman who's more zriza, how do you know that this system of waiting just a short period of time between lisha and afia is going to guarantee you that there's no chimutz, that chimutz is not going to take place? So in that sense, Rabbi Akiva is addressing Rabbi Gamliel. Now, if Rabbi Akiva rejects Rabbi Gamliel, then are we putting Rabbi Akiva into the camp of the Chachamim? And the only difference between Rabbi Akiva, what he's adding to the Chachamim, is just the logic of the Chachamim, explaining why they reject Rabbi Gamliel. And if Rabbi Akiva accepts the shita of the Chachamim, then perhaps we would say the following, that since we stagger these three segments of baking the bread, then we don't have to worry about all these variables, because, well, at least I can address two out of the three. I'm not sure if I can address all three. As far as the fuel is concerned, or as far as whether the oven has been preheated, well, it's one oven for all these three ladies. So that whatever time period it takes to bake the bread, but the only thing is, there's one oven, and we can already predict how long. Yeah, but who says that that period of time, let's say it takes, I'm just throwing out a number, let's say it takes 5 minutes to bake the bread. So how do we know that the aricha and the lisha, because again, in one case, it's going to, see the aricha and the lisha should not change that time period based, but if you're, just one second, if you're anticipating the lisha, so now what are you saying? If the lisha takes a longer period of time, I don't understand how the Chachamim would solve Rabbi Akiva's problem, because let's say in one case the Afiyah is going to take longer, but who says that therefore there's no quid pro quo ratio between the first two segments, meaning Lisha and Aricha and Afiyah. It would seem that, I mean, obviously there are variables that go into Lisha and Aricha as well, the size of the dough, for example. That's obvious. But why would that? That's if the dough is larger. If it's a larger dough, it's going to take longer to do the Lisha and longer to do the Aricha, and that's going to reflect itself in a, yeah, but who says that the Afiyah, I'm not sure that the Afiyah and the time it takes for Afiyah will be will be affected by the size of the, I guess let's assume a smaller, I don't know. Are we assuming that a smaller dough will bake faster than a larger dough? If you're willing to accept that, then maybe there is some sort of almost an interdependence between all these three avodas. Well, let's just leave it for the time being. I just want to go through the very short piece of Gemara that we have here and see. Maybe we'll be smarter after we see the Gemara. Tana Rabbana. So now we have a brisa. This brisa would seem to reflect the sheet of the Chachamim, staggering the three ladies. Lasha, it means that we'll call her, what should we call her? Rachel. Let's say Rachel is doing Lisha on the buttock. So she's first on line. She finishes kneading the dough, and then he mekatefes, which is a synonymous word to aricha. So she sets up the dough, and while she's up to the second stage, chaverta losha tachtel. So now we're up to Leah, we'll call her. So Leah begins the Lisha process. Fine. Now, when Leah starts her Lisha, then Mikatefes. So what? 1 second. So Rachel started with Lisha. Now we're up to Leah. When Rachel is busy with Mikatefes, Leah does the Lisha. Correct? Leah does the Lisha. And then what's going to happen is that Rachel, by the time Leah's finished with Lisha, Rachel is ready for the Afiyah. And then when Rachel is ready for the Afiyah, Leah is ready for the Mekatefes. And he Ofa. So now what's happening is Leah is up to the second stage of Mekatefes, and Rachel is up to the third stage of Afiyah. Chaverta, at that point, when Rachel is ready for the third stage and Leah for the second, now Chana, we'll call her, she is Mikatefes. Oh, I'm sorry. So he Ofa means that Rachel is now ready for Afiyah. Leah is ready for Mikatefes, Vashlishis, and now we invite Chana, who's number 3 on the list, and she starts the Afiyah. Now, when she starts the Afiyah, just 1 second, I'm sorry. Vashlishis Losha, she starts the kneading, and now Rachel, who started this process, is involved in Afiyah. Okay, now Rachel finishes the Afiyah. She now goes back to the beginning of the line. He, Losha, she starts again the process from the get-go with Lisha, V'chaverta, and now Leah is ready to take over the oven and bake, and Vashlichis Mikatefes. In other words, the one who is third on the line, we called Hachana, she's ready up to stage number 2, whereas Rachel, who is first on the line, is now going to take over, so to speak, the position of Afiyah v'chozeres Chalila. And then Kol's Mancha Otzkos Bibotek Eno Boli Dechimus. So now the Brisa gives us the underlying principle or logic that governs the whole principle, the whole operation and premise of the Chachamim, namely that we want to keep it going, that there's never a moment when the botzek is left without being manipulated, without being hisaskus. There's always hisaskus, and that's going to prevent chimutz. The Rambam Shita, by the way, in Perkei Milchas Chametz Matzah, is that kol zman she'oskim b'botzek eno machmitz afilu yisasku bo yom sholem. There's no time limitation. As long as you keep working the dough, it will not become to chimutz. However, the Ran points out that according to the Rambam, when the Mishnah mentions sholosh noshim, is l'chatchila lo itiru chachamim yoser mishir zeh. In other words, if there are too many ladies, it's very complicated. Shema lo tasok b'botzek kol hazman. Aval im osasa came, v'yodas b'vali shelo poska, if she testifies to the fact that she never stopped the process of kneading the dough, mils asikbo, or kituf, is ein choshin shehichmus. Aval b'chidushe ritva kosav chalodas harambam mutal lolush yoser mishir zeh afilu chatchila. The Rambam doesn't limit the 3 ladies. Umasha amra b'mishnah sholosh nashim hi eitza bi'alma shebiyosid nashim yitztarchu litroach harbe lasok b'botzek kedesh lo yanichu ha'isa below asek. In other words, the easiest way of manipulating this or engineering this in such a way that there's always constant isuk is if you have these 3 ladies and they stagger. Once you get to more ladies, it's more of a chash. It becomes more complicated to demand and expect with one oven for 5 ladies or for 20 ladies that each one is always constantly involved in somehow manipulating the dough so that it doesn't come to chimutz. Rabbi Akiva. Now let's see if we can decipher Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva Omer lo kol anoshim, and he says that not every situation is the same. We have all these variables. We have the different women that work at a different pace. We have different eitzim. Some are dry, some are wet. Different tanurim. Some were preheated, and some already cooled off. Is Tanya Omar Rabbi Akiva Danti Lifnei Ram Gamliel. This is what we said before, based on this Gemara that we're seeing now, that Rabbi Akiva was addressing himself to Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel had a klal, and the halacha was absolute that 3 women could begin kneading simultaneously, even though they're all going to bake in one oven in sequence, and one waits for the other one to finish her afiyah. Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu. So this is Rabbi Akiva's question to Rabbi Gamliel. B'noshim zrizos, or b'noshim she'enam zrizos. Are you telling me that this klal applies both in the case of noshim zrizos, so they can do the lisha, they can do the aricha very quickly, they're more professional, if you will. And what about women who are not so professional? You know, they're learning how to bake, so to speak. They don't have the experience. Enam zrizos. Or maybe they're lazy. What about eitzim lachim and eitzim yavashim? Don't you take into consideration the difference between dry wood and wet wood, moist wood? So that if you take into these variables into the equation, for example, let's say you had a combination of a lazy woman and relatively wet or moist wood and a cold oven. I mean, in those cases, the whole process of afia until you get to the last stage when, let's call it the Rachel is ready to bake her bread, or when Rachel successfully bakes her bread, so that now she makes room in the oven for Leah. In the meantime, a very significant amount of time has passed because Rachel was not as zariz, and she was using eitzim lachem, and she was using a tanur tzoneh. Omar Li. So when Gamliel answered, Ein lecha ela ma sheshanu chachamim. In other words, when the chachamim established that three women could start their process of kneading simultaneously, even though they're sharing one oven, they were falling back on a principle. And this now clarifies the last line in the Mishnah. We weren't sure when the Mishnah ends with Zeh Klal, to which part of, or which sheet in the Mishnah that came before it are we attaching this Zeh Klal? The answer is we're attaching it to Rabbi Gamliel. And in the middle, before this Zeh Klal, Rabbi Akiva was turning to Rabbi Gamliel and arguing against him and saying it doesn't make sense that you have no chashash that it'll come to Bechimutz simply because you assume a short period of time is going to elapse between Rachel's afia when she finishes until Chana at the end of the line will do her afia. After all, what about all these elements in the equation that would slow down the process? And if the afia is slowed down, then Memela, there's more of a lapse of time to allow this. So on that, Rabbi Gamliel counters and he says, Ein lecha ela ma sheshanu chachamim. That the chachamim made a statement, and we're going to rely on that statement, and the chachamim are not going to be matriach that we go through this whole staggerization, orchestrate that. That's already very complicated. It's a big tircha. And if an event a woman sees, she notices that too much time is going by, and Rachel is not baking her bread so fast because she's not so sharp and experienced, and she's using the wet wood, and the oven is cold. So then what she should do is, and this would be addressing either Leah or Chana, who are waiting online, is tavak til tosh bitzonin. So at that point, they should actively make sure that there won't be any process of fermentation by wetting their hands and continuing to do whatever they're doing on the dough, but this time with wet hands, that will arrest the process and slow down the process of fermentation. So basically, it sounds like Rabbi Gamliel is trying to find a way of balancing two elements. On the one hand, he's very inhibited, shall we say, against staggering, and that's going to require a tremendous amount of tircha. So he really wants to allow all these three women to start the process feel comfortable starting kneading simultaneously, but he's got to balance that with the variables that Rabbi Akiva is pointing out that could lead to chimus in a case where they all started kneading at the same time. And that's where he invokes this principle of the Chachamim of using the method of wetting their hands, and that's going to prevent chimus. Again, in that sense, Rabbi Gamliel is giving a heck of a lot of weight and reliance on the women, that they are so keen and observe, they observe and they're concerned about the possibility of chimus. They will take the necessary precautions, which is a general question in all of Shas. Whenever the Rabbanon make zeros, they always have to ask themselves whether or not we can rely on the error element, that maybe there'll be a mistake and they'll confuse one thing with the other. I had it today in the Daf Yomi. There was a question of whether if we allow them to apply bittul in min b'sheino mino, they'll apply bittul even in min b'mino. And that's Machlokes Rav and Shmuel. So Shmuel's not worried about that. Shmuel says, we have to teach Torah and make sure that people understand that we're allowing bittul because it's a case of min b'sheino mino, but not in a case of min b'mino. And Rav is more concerned that people, you have X number of people who might be sharp, they accept your guidelines, and then you have Y number of people who might be less meticulous about it, and we have to take into consideration even those people and make a gzeira. I'm just giving one example because I had it just an hour ago, but you could have 1,000,001 examples of how far do we go with gzeira? Do we assume that maybe somebody out there is not going to be careful about it, and therefore we want to make a gzeira? And Rabbi Gamliel says that now that we have this option, and a woman has this principle in her back pocket that before she can put her hands bitzonen, biltosh bitzonen, so then let's rely on the women. The women are very keen on the fact that they have to prevent the dough from becoming chametz, whereas the chachamim are not so keen on that. They're always worried about the possibility that a woman won't be, we're dealing with an Isser Kares over here, that a woman won't be so careful and she'll do what she has to do to prevent chimus from taking place. But what I still don't have a clear answer to the issue of staggering. How do we reconcile the staggering with Rabbi Akiva's variables? I guess even here, you have to allow for some margin of error, because given all these variables, it's not, meaning, again, unless I assume that somehow all these three procedures are related to the same variables, meaning that the afia doesn't make any bit of sense, what I'm saying there. You're just being nice to me that you don't want to laugh at me. But you really want to laugh me out of the place. No, because I don't see why, if the tanur is 100 degrees or 50 degrees, I don't believe, tell me if I'm wrong, why would that impact how long it takes her to knead the dough or how long it takes her to arrange the dough?
They don't start baking until the oven is hot. You got to start with that principle. They're not going to start with a cold oven and where it takes a half an hour, 45 minutes to heat up. You have to assume they're baking matzah. That means that the oven is already hot. All right. So then the question is, if they're misasek with the dough constantly, there's no possibility of chimetz anyway. You go from lisha to afia immediately. I mean, there's no
with
problem.
Aricha in the middle, right? Okay.
The aricha is hisaskus as well.
Right, for sure.
Okay, so really there is no possibility of chimutz. That's what Rabbi Gamliel says. Even if you wait from lisha until baking, it's not going to get to the time. And the second one is a production line. One does one thing, one does another thing, and one does a third thing, and they pass it on from one to the other. So it's not it's again. So the whole problem to me is not a problem. It makes a lot of sense, the Mishnah.
But we're trying to figure out, Rabbi, why Rabbi Akiva rejects Rabbi Gamliel, or for that matter, why did the Chachamim reject Rabbi Gamliel? In other words, if there's no issue and we can rely...
The Chachamim reject Rabbi Gamliel because there's a possibility. There is some time between lisha and baking.
Right.
Rabbi Gamliel says it's not enough time for chimutz, whereas the Chachamim say there might be. So they're a little bit more machmir. And Rabbi
Akiva is raising an objection based on the fact that not all situations are identical, meaning...
Right. And the answer is, what could go wrong if the time period is extended? So we have a solution. Put the batzek in cold water. Nothing's going to happen to it. So that's Rabbi Gamliel's answer. I'm not worried no matter what. Even if there's a span of time between the lisha and the afiyah, if it's too long, we'll put it in cold water.
Right, but let me focus your attention for a moment on the Chachamim. If it's Rabbi Akiva who is sort of the spokesperson for the Chacham, and he's turning to Rabbi Gamliel, and he's saying to Rabbi Gamliel, look, again, we know Rabbi Gamliel's counter argument. Like you say, she'll put cold water, but leave that out. I mean, right now we want to get into the mindset of Rabbi Akiva as the spokesperson.
Rabbi Akiva is questioning both of them, not just Rabbi Gamliel. He's questioning both of them. And he says, you can't make any rules about this because there are a lot of different possibilities. And then Rabbi Gamliel answered him and said, don't worry about it because we'll put it in cold water if there's a problem.
So you might be right, but let me present to you the Bartanura on this Mishnah. The Bartanura says on this Mishnah that Rabbi Akiva sover kedivrei chachamim. That's what I have here.
Okay. So even accepting that, Rabbi Akiva is questioning Rabbi Gamliel and says there is a period of time where nothing is happening. They finish the lisha and they're waiting for the afiyah. That's a problem. So therefore, Rabbi Gamliel answered him with the solution. Don't worry about it. I don't care about that problem because if need be, I put it in cold water.
But again, I'm just telling you why I'm not happy. Again, it's very easy to tell you I'm happy and we'll go weiter, and that's the easiest thing for me to do. But I'm a little bit too intellectually honest to do that. What I'm unhappy about is if we assume, as the Bartanura assumes, that Rabbi Akiva agrees with the Chachamim.
Okay.
How did the Chachamim solve Rabbi Akiva's problem? I don't see that, unless we're talking maybe in percentage points. In other words, somehow the Chachamim reduce the chash of chimutz. But if we don't introduce percentage points, just pure, the pure argument, straightforward logic of Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva is saying that there are so many elements in the equation here. How long is the afiyah going to take? Says Rabbi Akiva, I can't know that. And if I can't know that, then I understand why Rabbi Akiva is objecting to Rabbi Gamliel, but I don't understand how the Chachamim really have solved Rabbi Akiva's problem. He objects to Rabbi Gamliel because he says, what do you mean they're all going to start at the same time in their kneading process? So what? One lady will take longer in kneading and one the other, and one afiyah will take longer than the other. So how can you guarantee So this is his support for the Chachamim. But I just don't understand how, given all these variables that Rabbi Akiva is so concerned about, and why it's very iffy and relative as to how long, the aricha is going to take, or the kneading of the dough, how long the afia is going to take. There's so many variables that go into the equation. So I don't understand exactly why Rabbi Akiva was comforted by staggering. Because again, if you're talking about all these different variables,
Because
I
it's
don't
not
understand.
staggering. Look at it as a production
line. I'm saying, how does the
Right?
production line solve Rabbi Akiva's problem? That's what I don't.
Because during the whole process, there is no time that the dough is sitting by itself. It's always being acted
So then
upon.
accept Rabbi Gamliel. Then why not go the step further?
Rabbi Gamliel, there is a time between the lisha and the afia where it's sitting by itself. Therefore, there's a possibility of chimutz. There is no possibility by the chachamim of chimutz because it's always being processed. And there can be no chimutz all day, the Rambam says. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva says to Rabbi Gamliel, since there is a period of time where there is no hisaskus in the dough, there might come to chimutz. And there, Rabbi Gamliel answers him, don't worry about it. I'll put it in cold water.
But according to the Chachamim, there's always going to be his ask.
Right.
There's always going to be his ask. Chacham is saying that I'm not worried about a period of time. A second. So if they all start together, in other words, how do we guarantee that there'll always be a askus? If they all start the kneading process simultaneously, then what's going to happen is that the afia is going to take place
one after the other.
And there's no. And
so
since
while
they started the kneading at the same time, how do you guarantee that there'll always be a askus? But if, on the other hand, you stagger it. So when you how does staggering it, or you call it production line, I call it staggering, whatever the language is, how does that guarantee that there'll always be his askus? Because a woman knows that she has to constantly be misasik. So if they all start together, then what? Then we're not going to rely on the fact that she'll always be involved in this askus. Why? Because since they started together, there has to be a period of. But according to Rabbi Akiva, if you're going to say that the Chachamim accept that the principle that the assumption is that there'll always be misaseh. So what's the issue? What's the objection to Rabbi Gamliel? Rabbi Akiva objected to Rabbi Gamliel because if they all start the kneading process at the same time, I'm not sure that they'll always be misaskus, correct?
There isn't. That's the point. There isn't by Rabbi Gamliel. They finish the first 5 minutes. They're all doing lisha. Right. Then the first woman puts it in the oven. Right. The other two women are sitting there waiting.
Why? Why can't they be misasik? I mean, the Rambam says you could be misasik the whole day.
Why should they be misasik? They don't have to be misasik. Because it takes 18 minutes. So, and if they're not misasik for 5 minutes, they go out for a coffee. They do their lisha, they go out for a coffee, they come back 7 minutes later. It hasn't become chimutz yet. Then they put it in the oven.
But if it's a bazecher zeh, then what? They won't go out for coffee?
No. Look, the first one, they do lisha the first 5 minutes. Okay, they're all doing it together. Woman number one takes it right away and puts it in the oven. Takes 3 minutes to bake, right? The second woman is waiting. 3 minutes later, she puts it in the oven. And the other one is 6 minutes later, she puts it in the oven. So how much time has elapsed? Not enough time for chimutz. So Rabbi Akiva says, but they're different women. Sometimes they do this, sometimes they do that. So he says, I don't worry about that, because if need be, and the time is elapsing too much, they'll put it in cold water. To me,
again,
it's not
I'm
as
trying
difficult as
to
you're making
figure
it.
out, given Rabbi Akiva's nervous tension about the different elements and the different factors, what's the advantage of the, as you put it, the production line over the allowing that they all start together? So I think you were saying, as far, I'm just trying to digest it, that if you have this production line, then they'll always be, again, if we're going to assume up front they're always misasek, then Rambam says let them do this the whole day long.
Okay, that's
But
the
the answer
Chachamim.
is, you have to assume according to Chachamim, otherwise I don't see how the Chachamim are valid, have a valid point against Rabbi Gamliel. You have to assume that there's some element here of a chashash that they won't be constantly misasek. So now, if you grant that, what's the advantage? So if they all put it together, they all start eating at the same time. So then we have a serious chashash of that they won't be misasik. The solution to that problem is if we have this production line. Once we have the production line, then even if we're gonna have to wait a longer period of time, if they start together, then there's a longer period of time between Rachel's baking and, let's call it, Chana's baking. So if there's a longer period of time, we have that chashash of, but how do we cut down that time period? So we're going to cut down that time period, say the Chachamim, by telling Leah to start after Rachel finished her first round, and then Chana to wait till. So now you cut down the time period that it takes, the time period that could possibly lend itself to Ihisaskus. Why? Because if Chana is going to start her kneading simultaneous with Rachel, so then there's going to be a time period that's going to lapse between her active hisaskus, let's call it the necessary hisaskus, which is necessary for the baking process, and the extra hisaskus that she'll need to fill in that period of time, that lapse of time. So let's say she only needs, 2 minutes for Felicia, and now by starting all three of them at the same time, from Lisha till Afia, there's going to be an extra number of minutes, and that lends itself to Iyas Askus. But if you can cut down that time that lends itself to Iyas Askus by keeping Rachel, by keeping, let's call it, Chana, who's third on the line, busy from the moment that she starts, she adds the water to the dough, she's not waiting such a long time for Afia. Even though, again, Rabbi Akiva's point is that we don't know exactly in any particular case how long she's going to be waiting for the Afia. And it could be, and under certain circumstances, the Afia will be schlepping along. And then the Chacham have to admit that if the Afia is gonna be a long, tedious process because of this and because of that, then there will be more of an Iyasaskus period of time, but you've sort of cut it down by staggering it. By staggering it, you've cut down the time of Iyasaskus so that you, in a sense, reduce the chash that she might just pick up her hands, like you say, take a coffee break, and in the meantime, it'll become chum. All right, I like it. It's good. I mean, if that's okay with you, I think I could live with that. Again, it in a sense, it breaks down the machlokas here between Rabbi Gamliel and the Chacham as to what's the best method, given the chash of Iyas Askus, of reducing that chash. And Rabbi Gamliel, like you say, is not worried about that because the time period of Iyas Askus is a very short period, and in the worst case scenario, we can call the fire engine. We have a way out. We have this tanus and so forth. And the Chachamim say, no, let's not rely on that. Let's try to cut down the time period, limit the time period of Iyas Askus. But admittedly, even the Chachamim will have a time period of Iyas Askus if you take into consideration, all the variables. Now, I was trying to work it out that maybe the Chachamim was saying something like Chad v'Cholok, and that would answer, Rabbi Akiva, that because of Rabbi Akiva's problem with Rabbi Gamliel, the Chacham didn't have that problem because their orchestration completely obliviates or obviates the problem that Rabbi Akiva was raising. And I thought that maybe you can set up a system where even given all these variables, it'll create a kind of chain reaction in which, if the afiyah takes longer, then in a parallel way, the leash and a richa will take longer. But I wasn't able to do this. All right, Rabbi, so now we go on to the next Mishnah on Daf Mem Chesam and Beis. And now we're going to talk about Seyar, right? A Seyar is a dough that began to ferment, but it hasn't yet fermented. It's somewhere in that middle process. And we've discussed this in the past. But this is the original source, the Machlok Shrim Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim. Now, Yisaref, right? The Torah tells us that Seyar has to be destroyed, just like Chametz has to be destroyed, because Seyar is already considered Chametz. Ha'ochlo potter. However, even though it's considered Chametz, but it's not complete Chametz. It's what we call Chametz she'eno gamur. It has begun the process of chimutz, but it hasn't completed. So it's in that kind of twilight zone. And here we have a shita that we're going to identify this seir as chametz nuksha. That might create problems for us down the line because if it's chametz nuksha, maybe it's only also midrabanan. But in any event, the Mishnah says ha'ochlo potter, so he doesn't get any punishment. There's no malchus, there's no kores. It's not chametz gomer. Okay, now, at what point does it become chametz gomer? And really, we're asking two questions. At what point is it seyar, and at what point is it chametz gomer? So according to the Mishnah, and this opening line in the Mishnah seems to be universally accepted, there's something called siduk. We're going to have a machlokus exactly what siduk is. Mar l'shitaso, Rabbi Yehuda is going to identify siduk as X. Rabbi Yehuda, that's Rabbi Yehuda. And the Chacham are going to identify siduk as Y. But in principle, when it reaches that stage of siduk, then it's considered chametz gamur. Yisaref and ha'ochlo chayav kares, meaning that both in seir and in siduk, we have to get rid of it. We're not allowed to eat it. So therefore, we're going to burn it. But as far as achila is concerned, here's the fundamental difference between seir and siduk. Once it reaches the state of siduk, then it's mamish chametz gamur yechayev kares. And now we get to the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Chacham. Ezu Siyar, and I could add Ezu Siduk. What is Siyar? Where it's too early in the stage of becoming chametz, and therefore it's not chametz, although whatever it is, it has to be destroyed. We're not allowed to eat it, but it's not chametz. It's not real full-fledged chametz. And when does it become full-fledged chametz? As siduk. So Rabbi Yehuda's sheet is the following. Kikarnei chagovim, when there are stukim, these siduks, right? So there's certain like cracks or lines on the surface of the dough, that's already seor. That's already enough that we have to get rid of it. But siduk is achinis arvu stuck in zebazeh. In the next stage of fermentation, what happens is the stukim now overlap one on top of the other. Chachamim omrim zeh ochlo chayav kares. Even if we're at the early stage of what what Rabbi Yehuda calls kikarne chagavim, even at that early stage, when the stukim don't overlap, they go, in each direction, that also is considered chametz. And therefore, seir has to be one step earlier than kikarne chagavim. Because if it's already reached the stage of kikarne chagavim, the chachamim argue that's ochlo chayv kares. That already qualifies as chametz gom. V'ezu seir. So what did the Mishnah have in mind when it said that you're patur if it's earlier than siduk, meaning it's earlier than even the early siduk of kikarne chagavim? What comes before kikarne chagavim? At the very, very inception, the very beginning of the process of chimutz, is ezu seir. When is it called seir? And it's early, early, early. That's kol shechsifu panav ke'adam she'amdo sarosa. So it's like he's the top surface, the outer surface of this dough becomes white. I guess it turns white or whitish color. And that's similar in the mashal to a person who is so shocked that his face turns white and his hair stand on end. Tana Rabbanon, the Brisa again records a machlokes regarding seir and siduk, but here the Brisa doesn't mention Rabbi Yehuda. The first shita in this Brisa is Rabbi Meir. Kol shechsifu panav ke'adam she'andu sarosav. That's called seir. Now, this reflects the shita, although again we're quoting Rabbi Meir, of the Chachamim in our Mishnah, which means that if it hasn't reached the state of Hechsifu Panav, then it's Matzah, it's not Chametz. But once it reaches the state of Hechsifu Panav, even though it's not yet Siduk, it's pre-Siduk, it's already considered Seir, and it's prohibited. Again, whether it's chametz nuksha or it's doraisa, that we'll have to address that issue. So, what is siduk? What's the next level, the next stage beyond hirsifu panav? And that's kikarne chagavim, which the chachamim in our Mishnah already identified as chametz gomor. Divrei Rabbi Meir, the chachamim omrim. Now, the Chachamim here in this Brisa are going to reflect the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda and Mishnah. Ezu Seir Kikarne Chagavim. We just finished saying in the name of Rabbi Meir that Kikarne Chagavim is final Chametz. That's already Siduk. But now we're quoting the Shita of the Chachamim, which, as I said before, is Rabbi Yehuda Shita and Mishnah, that Kikarne Chagavim is not yet Chametz. It's the pre-Siduk state in which you would not be chayav if you ate it. And when does it become chametz gomer ezu siduk? Shenis arvu stakim zebozeh v'zeh v'zeh ochlo chayav kares. So it means that siduk is the stage of chametz gomer. Rabbi Meir identifies siduk as kikarne chagavim. The chachamim here in this brisa identify siduk as a later stage, way beyond Kikarne Chagavim. It's already Siduk of Nisarvu Stakim Zebazeh. Both Rabbi Meir and the Chacham agree that once it reaches Siduk, which might be Kikarne Chagavim or it might be Nisarvu Stakim Zebazeh, according to each Shita, you're Chayav Kares. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. How do you reconcile this brisa that says that according to Chachamim, right? Shel direi Chacham chayav kares al siur. Right, the Brisa says that according to Chachamim, ezu siur kekarnei chagovim, and then it says zev v'zeh ochlo chayav kares. The Gemara now understands in the Havamina that the zev v'zeh is an extension of the Chachamim's view, and the Chacham is saying that whether or not you're at the early stage of Kekarnei Chagavim, or you have the Siduk of this Arvu Zebazeh, in both cases, you're Chayiv Kares. How could that be? Vanan Tnan Seir Yisari for Ochlo Potu, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Now we've identified the Chachamim with Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah. And Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah says that there's a fundamental difference between Seir, which is before Karnei Chagavim, and Siduk. In the case of Seir, he says Ochlo Potu. And yet the Chachamim seem to assume that even in the case of Karnei Chagavim, which is before Siduk, you're Chayav. Rabbi Yehuda says that Karnei Chagavim is Seir and you're not Chayav. So the Gemara answers, Ema, we're going to have to reinterpret the Zev Zeh Ha'ochlo Chayav Kares. That's not a hemshech. That's not a continuation of the Chachamim, but rather, this is Rabbi Yehuda. The last few words in this brisa, namely Zev Zeh Ha'ochlo Chayav Kares, relate back to Rabbi Meir. And what does it mean? Zev Zeh, according to Rabbi Meir, whether it's Nisarvu Stokim Zev Zeh, which is Rabbi Yehuda's identification of chametz, or even if it's meruchakim zemizeh, it's not muravim but meruchakim, it's kikarnei chagavim. Even in that case, which Rabbi Yehuda called seyar, Rabbi Meir classifies that as chametz gavur, and therefore ochlo chayav kares. So in the Havamina, the Gemara thought that zevazeh ochlo chayav kares is an extension of Rabbi Yehuda, or in this case the Chachamim. That can't be, because we know that Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that if it's Kikarnei Chagavim, then you're potter. It's only Seir. You haven't gotten to the stage of Sida. So how can you possibly say Zev Zeh Ochlo Chayav Kares? More answers that the Zev Zeh Chayav Kares is going back to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir is saying that your two stages, Rabbi Yehuda, or the Chacham in the Brisa, are both beyond the red line, so to speak, have crossed the criterion for chametz gamur, and both of them will generate a chiyuv kares. Amar Rava, my time with Rabbi Meir. Why does Rabbi Meir say that already at the stage of kekarnei chagavim yechayiv kares? And the Gemara answers, Ein lecha kol sedek v'sedek milamal she'ein lo kama stokim milamat. What we see on the surface level with our naked eye is indicative of a much more profound and advanced stage of fermentation that's going on below the surface, that's concealed from the naked eye. So you have a sedek lamala, and below that, which you're not able to see, there are lamala lamata inside the dough. And therefore, according to this premise of Rabbi Meir, even in this early stage of Kekarnei Chagavim, where there are Stokim Lamala, but they are not Mu'uravim Zebazeh, but we have to assume that parallel below the surface, there are Stokim Lamata, which are Mu'uravim Zebazeh, and that's considered Chametz Gam. He writes here, the time of Rabbi Yehuda, on the other hand, Hasover she Karnei Chagavim Eino Chametz Gamur. That was poshut to the Gemara. The Gemara never even asked the question, addressed the question to Rabbi Yehuda. Shekein Anuroim Shebekol Chametz Gamur Hastokim It's Arvim Zev. So we have the following two premises. Number one, two scenarios, so to speak. One mitzvah is that we see Chametz Gamur, and there the Stokim are Muravim Zev. The other mitzvah is that we see Kekarnei Chagavim and the Stokim are not Muravim Zebazeh. So it's obvious, says Rabbi Yehuda, And in the latter case, it's not chametz gomer because it doesn't look like chametz gomer. It's only got those stuckim that go this way and that way. They don't overlap. It's kikarni chagomer. That can't be chametz gomer. Al Rabbi Meir, here's where the Gemara raises an objection because who's sover shegamim lonis arvu astokim areza chametz gomer. And the Gemara says that if lonis arvu hastokim, that's not chametz. We know exactly what chametz looks like. And it's always this arvu asdokim. The tirza Gemara sha'af shalamala lo nis arvu asdokim b'komakom lemata vadai nis arvu hastokim, so that the his arvus of stokim has a simon to it. In other words, the kikarni chagavim is a simon that warns us and notifies us that it really is nis arvu hastokim. And that, Hashem, will pick up tomorrow, the Mishnah here on the top of Daf Mem Tes of an Al. Okay then, so I wish you a wonderful day and thank you so much.